All right. Well, welcome everybody to Youthtopia Talks. Today, we will be exploring the topic of empowered women, empower women. So this is all about female representation in activism. A little tradition, some of you that have been coming back to our Youthtopia Talks, we like to address the audience, the live audience joining us today with some fun facts. We have people joining in from all over the world, quite literally, but our youngest person watching is 14 years old. Hello to you. And our oldest person is 61. Now, we received over 40 questions from the audiences that we have already received during the pre-survey round, and we'll try and address this in our conversation. But again, for those of you that are joining for the very first time, we actually do have an opportunity where at the end of the session, after listening to the amazing speakers, you yourself will have the opportunity to potentially unmute yourself, share your video, and address the panelists today. So keep that in mind. We're gonna keep you active on the chat for that opportunity. My name is Melati. I'm the founder of Youthtopia and the co-host for today's event. I'm joined by my other co-host, Maya.
Hi everybody, welcome. My name is Maya and I will be co-hosting today's talk with Melati.
All right, without further ado, let's get down to business, shall we? Youthtopia Talks is one of the many initiatives that we run here at Youthtopia to really share knowledge on global issues and potential solutions for sustainable change through the eyes and through the perspective of young changemakers, and share that with more young or rising young changemakers. For this Youthtopia Talk specifically, again, we are looking and highlighting the topic of female representation in the space of activism. Women throughout history have always been on the rise, from Denise Ho fighting for human rights in Hong Kong to Raden Ajeng Kartini fighting for accessible education for women during the Dutch colonization of Indonesia. Everyone who shared their Me Too campaigns, for example, again, on social media, women on the rise. And I think that this is a common trend that we have seen throughout history, but again today, even with the global issues that are happening all over the world. A new generation of activists is on the rise as well, and continue to inspire others to do the same.
And with that, everyone, please join us in welcoming our incredible lineup of young changemakers and artists from all over the world today. Faye Simanjuntak, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, Wadi Ben-Hirki, and Stephanie Dickson. So our first warm-up question for the day for you lovely speakers is, who is your female activist, role model, or hero, and why? Stephanie, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Stephanie here, tuning in from Singapore today. So excited to be here. So thank you guys for putting this together. It's really exciting. My female activist, I mean, the first person that came to mind when I read the question was a lady called Marie Forleo. And while she's not a typical activist, she is an activist in her own way with how she's sort of taking on an industry that's typically very male driven and really helping to empower women all around the world to start their own businesses through the content that she creates. And she really helped me a lot when I started my business a couple of years ago, 5 years ago now. And just, yeah, really solid advice, and just helps you to realize that everything is figure outable, which is one of her key lines. And I think, yeah, she's just fantastic. And then more in sort of the environmental activist, I have to say it's Melati, which is super lame, but I love you.
A little fangirl moment here for me.
Seriously though, I've been following your work forever, and I think you're just so inspiring, you and so many of the other youth activists. For me, it's just, I think without the youth, I would have lost faith a long time ago in this movement. In some aspects, obviously, you know, there's still a lot of amazing stuff happening, but I think having that fresh perspective, you know, the can-do attitude, just not letting anything stop you, and just the beauty of having a youthful mind that is so knowledged, you know, like you've got so much access to amazing information these days, like more than any other generation has ever had, but to see that being used for such positive work, yeah, I think, Melati, you are a little superhero.
Oh, right back at you, you know, Steph. I mean, you started it 5 years ago now, Green is the New Black, and you completely revolutionized, and you have that same energy and you have that same passion. So love right back your way.
That's a really cute moment. And now I think we're going to pass it on to Wadi. Would you like to take on who is your female superhero?
So this question is very difficult because I have a lot of them. But if I would choose, I would say Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She's Nigerian, but I chose her not because I'm from Nigeria, but because of the amazing work she's doing. You know, it's difficult being a female activist here because of so many issues around discrimination, culture, prejudice, and so many things. But over the years, she has been able to use her platform and her voice and influence to, you know, speak for many young girls and women who are marginalized. So I would say Chimamanda in terms of female activism. And this will sound cliche, but I'll also say Melati, not because she's here or because I'm a part of Utopia, but because the first time she reached out to me when we had a call and I knew her age, I was so stunned and really happy to know that there are young people out there doing really remarkable things. So these are the two women that I would say, apart from my mother. Thank you.
Oh my guys, I mean, it's 100%. This is what it's all about. This is empowered women, empower women. Okay, so I hope all of you are smiling as big as I am. Those of you watching and whatnot. This is what it's about. This is the energy we create as females on the front line. Because we know it's not one person. It's a community where we have to rise each other up. So thank you for that, Wadi. Faye, an idol of mine, someone I look up to. Who are your women superheroes?
So I have to say, first of all, Adichie is one of my favorite authors as well. So it's awesome to hear that.
Me too.
Yay! My favorite activist when I was just starting out Rumafé was in 2013, and it was actually a week after Malala Yousafzai's book came out. And I remember reading that, and I remember like just going through a Wikipedia page, learning all about her. And she's really what inspired me to not necessarily start, but who really enforced the idea that I could do something, because even at that point, even when I was already doing something, I was still really doubting myself. I didn't think I could do it. But seeing her not only like spearhead a movement, but also be willing to stand up for the movement at such a high cost, that's really what pushed me to do something. And I don't want to jump on the bandwagon. You already know what I'm going to say. But we've been, I've known you because we started about the same time, and I've known you for like since we both started. And I think every time I see your work, I'm always so proud. And, I have to tell everybody that whenever we're talking about activism, they're talking about who else should be invited as speakers. Usually they already know you, but I always put out, Melati and Isabel from Bye Bye Plastic Bags are the most incredible girls. So got to jump on the bandwagon for that one.
Terima kasih. And, I think to highlight what you were saying of really having other women in your circle that you have access to that hold the megaphone for you, and who really go above and beyond. And I think that's really powerful of one of your role models, Faye, as well. So I'm going to bring in a second question here. Maya did the hot potato warm-up question. Now we're really going to dive into, this is a question from Audrey. Audrey, if you're joining us today, we took this from your survey questionnaire. Your question is, how has the role of females in activism evolved in recent years? And what does the female representation in activism in 2020 consist of? So I think this was a really interesting one that we wanted to ask right at the top, because, before going into more in depth about your stories and how you became activists, what are some of your awakenings of seeing the evolution of females in activism at the front lines? Who wants to take this one? Wadi, I'm gonna pass it on to you because I saw you and I was like, go for it.
I would like you to please repeat so that I don't miss any part of the question, if you don't mind.
Sure, for sure. So the question from Audrey is, how has the role of females in activism evolved in recent years? And I think you have quite an interesting perspective, Wadi, as well, coming from Nigeria, and especially the work you do. How do you feel activism for females has evolved?
Okay, thanks for that question. It's a very important question, I would say. I would say it has evolved because, for example, I'm 23 years old, right? And last year I was privileged to be at the UN Women Conference to review the Beijing Plus 25 platform. So that happened let's say 25 years ago. I wasn't born, but seeing some of the women who were there 25 years ago to spearhead the movement and talk about the need for, gender equality, which is SDG 5, it was really touching for me to see how based on the World Economic Forum report in 2018, it states that it will take about 108 years to achieve gender equality. But if you ask me, I'll say we've evolved because many years ago, girls and women didn't have as much, privilege and opportunities as we do now. For example, there are many, we say women deserve seats at the table, and we haven't gotten there yet, but we are definitely not where we used to be many years ago. In terms of maybe even politics and governance in Africa, for example, over 50 years ago, I would say there was no female president, but we see the likes of Ellen Johnson Sirleaf and the president of Ethiopia now evolve. So it may be in the big ways we measure or the small ways, but we have really evolved because even at the global stage, there are many women who are taking on big leadership positions. So we really need more, we deserve more, but we aren't where we used to be. And if you ask why and how, it's because we now know our rights. It's not like people did not know the rights before, but we are more aware of our rights and we know more about solidarity and one voice. It's not like someone here is saying one thing and another woman here is saying another thing. When it comes to, gender equality and fighting for our rights, we are really united, and that has been able to help us to measure a lot of success. So even in Nigeria, Africa, and the world at large, there has been a lot of progress, and that's because we've been setting up, civil society organizations. We've been speaking up, and not just speaking up, but also educating people also in grassroots communities about their rights and empowering them to speak up as well. We now have more girls and women in decision-making tables that are, there's something about this, nothing about us without us. So that is really coming to play because when decisions are made about women and girls, we have representation there. We need more, we demand more, but there's been a lot of progress. There was a follow-up question there. I'm not sure I got it. Could you please tell me, Melati?
Yeah, I think, Wadi, what I wanted to touch on as well over here is that, you touched on the point of education and amplifying that so that we know our rights. And as soon as you said that, I could see Faye's head just continuously nod. So Faye, I'm just gonna jump over to you real quick for that question, because I know your work with Ruma Faye also revolves heavily on having people, young people especially, knowing their rights. So how would you answer the question of Audrey of how has the role of females in activism evolved in recent years?
Something I would emphasize that Wadi mentioned is that we deserve more, but we've evolved. And I think that's something that we really, really need to emphasize in a conversation like this, that yes, we've done lots, and our institutions have also begun to really understand and acknowledge, not only acknowledge, but enforce women's rights in the areas where they're really needed. But there's also sometimes I feel not enough focus on grassroots long-term change. And that's where, that's where I work most. That's my specialty with my team as well. It's the idea that in order to really get to true gender equality, in order for women to have the same access to resources, we have to start from grassroots change and changing mindsets. So there's longevity in the change that we put. And so I think when I reflect, I haven't been working as long as maybe our other friends here. I've been working for almost 7 years in October, and gender equality work and children's rights work. And although I can't say I've seen as much evolution just because it's such a short amount of time, what I can say I've seen is the change that's happened in the communities that we've served, that we've worked in with Ruma Faye. And the thing is, we come into these communities, and my team, we're mostly female. We work with mostly men, mostly male leaders, and mostly male children, and we're talking about reproductive health. We're talking about women's rights. We're talking about all these very, very taboo topics that people never really come in to talk about in these areas, especially considering Indonesia, we're all very religious and we all consider these topics very taboo. And so what we've seen, because we come in continuously again and again to the same areas over the span of years, really over like 6-7 years, we see that when we come back, there's more female leaders, there's more girls involved, there's more girls taking a stand and wanting to explain like their opinion and being brave enough. I've seen the impact that comes with extended importance or extended emphasis in grassroots community on women's rights. Yeah.
Amazing. And I think the contrast between you saying you have a team of female workers and then you guys are working with mostly male leaders, and I think that it's important that we have females as leaders as well. I'd like to move the question over to Steph now, and I'll just reiterate it because I know it was a pretty long question. How has the role of female activism evolved in recent years for you, Steph?
Really interesting. I think it's such an exciting and fascinating time to be alive. I think what we've sort of seen here in Singapore in the beginning, a couple of years ago when I started doing Green is the New Black and everything that we're doing, I was kind of ridiculed actually within the framework of Singapore. A lot of people didn't really understand what I was doing, why I cared about sustainability. And I think now, fast forward a few years, there is so much amazing youth-led and female-led change. And really, because, you have to remember as well, in places like Singapore, we can't actually protest here. It's illegal to protest. And so the creativity and the support that the youth have been given and that the activism movement has really had and evolved here, it's been really inspiring to see. They get very creative about online protests or having, different ways of doing things that it's just really inspiring because they have to really find the gray in all of the black and white.
Yeah, with all the
exactly.
Rules sure.
Yeah, but I also think that, kind of echoing what's been shared before, is that it's just so fantastic now that so many women in this space are actually being brave enough to stand up and say, this is not right, or I believe we can do something better. And just seeing that across the region in so many different ways, and just having being able to have the support system for those women, but also women just supporting other women. And so I think it's a really beautiful time and a really exciting time to kind of see what's going to be happening moving forward, and hopefully more and more of this.
I think especially with rising NGOs like Aware, who fight for women's rights in Singapore, I think that this is a really important and special time, like you said, where people are coming together and really enforcing this idea of female empowerment, and it's being noticed, which is great. And I think if we could have more Youthtopia in Singapore, we could further emphasize that. So that's a little something for everyone tuning in from Singapore. And I'd like to move on to our next question for you guys, which is, when was the first time you realized your passion for activism towards a specific cause? And I know you all have your own story. Faye, would you like to start us off on this one?
Yeah, totally. So I started activism quite young, I think about the same age as a bit older than Isabel, a bit younger than Wadi. I started when I was 11, and I had started, coming into these anti-trafficking, volunteering in anti-trafficking organizations and children's rights organization a bit before that as a little volunteer. And honestly, I think I never really saw myself as somebody who would start something. I never saw myself as an initiator. I was proactive enough to join organizations, but I didn't think that my role in anti-trafficking work was as an activist or as a leader, really. Truthfully, I don't think I found my passion really until I started anti-trafficking work, because before that, it wasn't that I found my passion, but it was more that I realized that I had an opportunity to do something. And I thought that as somebody with the privilege to do something, I also had the responsibility to take that opportunity. And so really, when I started being super passionate about activism was when I started seeing results in the volunteering I did, before Faye started. And, I don't want to take up too much time, definitely, but I think if I could, pinpoint a specific place in time when I realized what we could do with Rumah Faye, it was because at that point we were doing education forums, education workshops, discussions with kids about children's rights, about reproductive health. And it was 6 or 7 months after we started, and one of the girls came to me, and bear in mind, I was 10 or 11 years old at the time, and she was the same. And she told me that her grandfather had been molesting her, in different terms. But there was a moment there where I just thought, why would you tell me? I'm 10 years old, I don't know anything, and so are you, right? But that's when I realized what was so important at that point was this peer-to-peer education we had been doing. She knew that I wasn't somebody to report the case to because we had taught them that, but she saw me as a peer who would come with her to take the necessary steps in order to prevent that from happening again to her and to her peers. And so we were able to help her get the legal aid she needed, to help her get the counseling she needed, to make sure that the case was brought to court. And, we were lucky the case was resolved, blah, 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 blah. But at that point, I think that's when I realized that I had a role to play. And I think it really did not made me not ignited, but made me discover that I did have that passion and I could do something with that passion. And there was power in peer-to-peer, women-to-women education and support.
Oh, yes. I think, again, that opportunity almost where you are able to find and connect with a passion at such a young age and give it purpose and give it meaning to continue a work like you did with Ruma Faye is something that a lot of people ask, how do I get there? How do I find that moment? And we'll touch on that later in the discussion. But I also wanted to give Wadi and Steph a little bit of a moment to share their stories. How did they get started? What was it? And what are they currently working on? So Wadi, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Melati. So I'm really happy to hear Faye's story, knowing that at such a young age, not being too aware about many things, but being able to just start from somewhere. And I think that would be somewhat like my story. Growing up, I would say in Nigeria, there are many positives to it, but also negatives, such as culture and tradition. So I come from northeastern Nigeria, and in the north, that's where we have like a lot of child marriage and a lot of gender-based violence issues. So based on reports from UNICEF, we have the third highest number of child brides in the world. So that was what really struck me, especially when I was about 8 or 9 years old, knowing that one of my best friends in primary school didn't return to school. I was very inquisitive to know why, and I asked my teacher, and she said she was married off because her father couldn't pay off a debt or something like that. And as at that point, I did not really understand the depth to it until I became a teenager and saw that it was really rampant. So I'm grateful to be born into a family that understands the importance of girls and women, and my parents have given us the best education possible, but not many of my friends or cousins or relatives have that, that freedom and that right, being protected. So that was what really struck me, and I decided to start fighting for the rights of girls, and women in northern Nigeria, and also the issues of the whole Chibok girls, where there was a campaign, Bring Back Our Girls, that was really a global campaign that happened in northeastern Nigeria, where I'm from. So all those things really, added to the passion in me to really try to do something about it in my own little way. And that was what really prompted me to start the activism. At 18, I registered my organization, had a lot of young people who were also passionate, and we started doing grassroots work, started, advocating for policies to be passed to protect girls and women. And then I started volunteering for many other organizations who would give me, bigger platform to amplify my voice. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you for that. And I think it's nice that you guys are sharing such personal stories with us, being really face to face with such huge issues as such young children. I mean, Faye at the age of 11 and Wadi at the age of 9, for your friend to be married off. I just think that it's really nice that you guys are sharing these stories with us, but also that the responsibility that comes with it, and that's what ignites your passion, essentially. And before we go into more depth, Steph, could we ask you, when was the first time you realized your passion for activism?
Yeah, so wow, I'm so amazed and inspired by both of your stories. So thank you guys for sharing. It's just incredible the work that you're doing and being activated at such a young age. My activation was a little bit later in life. I was working in the fashion industry, and it was my dream job. I'd always wanted to work in fashion, and I was running fashion festivals and events around Asia. And it was really fun. My life was kind of like The Devil Wears Prada. Maybe I'm going to show my age a bit by citing that film, but it was really crazy, but I kind of loved it. I was young and it was exciting. And then I started doing a lot of research and started reading a lot of things and watching documentaries, which can be a very slippery slope. And I watched a documentary called The True Cost, which basically is an expose on how dirty and how horrifically socially corrupt the fashion industry is. And at the time, I was very young, fashion lover, watching this documentary and then deep diving into information about it. I was so blindsided and felt so mad and naive and stupid for not realizing what was actually going on in the industry I was working in. And it was that moment, it kind of felt like, a point of no return. I kind of had this moment where I sat there, I was like, wow, am I really going to give up like the career I've dreamt about for like 15 years just because of this like thing that I'm now discovering? And then it was like a split second. I was like, well, of course. I mean, there's nothing I can, like, there's no way I can continue working, knowing what I know now in this part and putting all my energy here. So I basically quit my job with no plan and started trying to learn about sustainability in Singapore. But I was faced with a lot of the stereotypes at the time. So, you know, the groups were either too preachy or too businessy or too hippie. And I just didn't feel like I could raise my hand and be like, I'm really new to the sustainability thing. I'm really passionate, but I have no freaking idea what I'm doing. And this was kind of before, you know, Instagram and that kind of stuff were really big, and you could just discover stuff on so much easier. You know, these kind of global events weren't really happening to the scale. So yeah, it was hard. And I just basically said, okay, I'll just do it myself. So started a community here in Singapore, doing events, putting together festivals, because that's what I knew how to do, and just helping other people to learn that actually we can be sustainable and conscious and talk about these issues in a safe space, in a place with no judgment, but in a place where we can actually learn and thrive, and we can do something about it in our daily lives in a place like Singapore. So that's kind of how I became an activist.
Yeah, I mean, everybody, I guess now you can see why we love all the speakers we have with us today. It's kind of this attitude of just, you know, no matter what, as soon as, and Steph, you said it just now, of like, you know, there's no way that I can continue like normal with knowing what I know now, right? It's this rolling up the sleeves and just getting started. And that's something I admire with all of you joining us here today. But I also know, being a young change maker and a female young change maker myself, there are a lot of moments where I felt like I had barriers or challenges just because of my gender. Can you share with us some of like the moments, specific moments or general moments where you felt like you kept coming up against these challenges throughout your work? Faye, I'm gonna pass it over to you.
Sorry, could you repeat the question? I'm scared I might have missed it.
Yeah, so it's more about like, so what are the challenges, you know, that you're being perceived as because you're a girl, because you're too young? What are some of the challenges that you have faced throughout the work you do?
You know, I'm going to be completely honest. For a long time, I thought that I didn't face those same barriers as a young person, as a girl, just because they were things I was used to. And that's something that's so terrible for me to say, but I was used to treat it that way. And I didn't really have anyone to compare it to or to compare my notes with. And so I always thought, you know, this is what starting out like activism was like. And you'll see there are even interviews, I think, of when I was younger, and I justify how people treated me because I said, you know, it was just because we were new. It was because we were starting out. But looking back, you know, I came to the realization that a lot of times I was rejected and I was forced out of places because of not only my age, but also my gender. I was kicked out of 2 conferences because of my age, because I was thought to be too young. Like I would be there and then they told me to get out of the room because they said, you know, this isn't appropriate for children. And the whole reason I started Rumafe was because I believe that child trafficking couldn't be prevented through engaging the vulnerable population, which was children. So a lot of the conversations surrounding like children's rights, surrounding policies about children never included children, especially girls, because they didn't have the same access to education that the young males did. And so I think I was just having a conversation with a collaborator for Rumafe a week ago. And she was saying, you know, I love how, you're so result oriented. When we were first talking, I didn't really talk. I didn't say like much of how are you? What are you doing? I went immediately to, okay, what's your plan? Do you have a term of reference? Do you have a standard operating procedure? What are we doing next? And I was like, wait, you know, that kind of behavior, not that it's bad necessarily, but it wasn't something that was really me. You know, I love conversations. I love talking to someone, but that's something I adopted because I didn't want people to see me as a young girl. I didn't want people to see me as like alienated from the movement that I was doing. And so I think it's something that it's much better now. And I think I've been, you know, treated wonderfully, but I think it's also partly because I've been doing this for 7 years. I don't think people who are starting now, I think a lot of young female activists struggle with the same things that I did back when we were first starting. So I think when it comes to challenges that we faced, it was a lot of judgment. It was a lot of closed doors, especially. And I think as much as I want to say that the system is changing, it's not changing as much as it should be. And the only advice I could give is just to keep, you know, writing letters, keep sending emails, keep knocking on those doors, because there will be somebody who's going to help. But yeah, there were a lot of challenges.
I felt so sad, and I'm sure other females listening to this saying that, oh, you know, I was used to it at that point. And I was just like, no, that shouldn't happen. It shouldn't be like this. And I also think, you know, you saying that you were kicked out of conferences, children are highly underestimated in a big way. And I think that's why stuff like this is so important. And I loved your answer. So thank you for that. And I'd like to pass it on to Stephanie now. What changes have you faced as a female activist?
Funnily enough, for me, it was less in the activism, but I think echoing Faye, I think I probably just never realized it was really happening because you're just so used to it as a female in certain situations. But where I really noticed it was actually with other female. So this is more on like the entrepreneurship side of the work. So I remember going to female meetups and being really judged because I didn't have my shit together. I didn't know what I was doing with my life. And, you know, there were like these entrepreneur meetups and I was so excited to like be around other entrepreneurs. And I tried to volunteer for something to like support because I thought it was a really great initiative, what they were doing, like trying to, you know, build like women who were, you know, entrepreneurs in Singapore across multiple different industries, but with a big focus on tech. And when I went to volunteer, everyone there was kind of doing really important things. And I was kind of one of the only people that was like, yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what I want to do. I've got this passion for sustainability and I want to do stuff. And basically like they just kind of dismissed me massively in the meeting. And then later when I tried to follow up, like I got ignored in 3 different channels. And I just remember being like, wow, if this is what women do to each other, you know, like what chance do we really have? And so I decided from then on out, I would only do events that were inclusive, both male and female, because I didn't want to have to deal with the bitchiness and the female misogyny that happens in these kind of situations sometimes. And I was like, wow, this is actually really sad. And I had a moment of like being sad for our female like kind of population. Since then, I think it was just a toxic group, to be honest. Like now I'm a little bit older, a little bit wiser, and I look back and I think culture of even groups like this and communities it's so important who is driving it at the top, and that the people who are running that particular group, I think were just those kind of women. And now I can spot them and I can, you know, navigate very quickly through if communities are going to be the right kinds of communities. And I think that just, at the time it was devastating, but it actually then spurred me to be like, screw all this. I'm just going to start my own community. It's going to be amazing and welcoming. People are going to feel safe. And I want to create a space where we can talk about these really difficult issues that people don't understand, but they're not going to be made to feel like idiots for it. So that was, yeah, my personal experience.
When it comes to female leadership, sometimes when you're saying female misogyny, I feel like that comes from the idea that there can only be one female at the top, so that there's kind of like a cat fight for it at the bottom, which is why this happens. But it shouldn't be like that. It should be all of us supporting each other and then having more space at the top, right? But I just think that that's a sad truth that hopefully we can overcome through more discussions like this and less toxic environments stuff. And Wadi, I'd like to hear what you would have to say for the challenges that you've faced as a female activist.
So for me, I would say one thing that was profound that the 2 speakers said was when, you know, you're used to something and you don't even think it's a problem. And that brings me to this quote: birds born in cages think freedom is a crime. So you've been so used to something and you think that is the norm. And then when you look back years later, you're like, wow, this is actually not normal. So for me, there were 3 things I faced: my age, my gender, and my race. So it was quite difficult for me. But one thing my parents taught me growing up was that you should live freely and unapologetically. You shouldn't, you know, let anyone shut you up or let anyone oppress you. It wasn't so easy, but then I had to learn that to grow a thick skin. So many times when I go to places and people see me and they're like, "You're too bold for an African." I'm like, are you kidding me? Or you're too bold for a young woman or something like that. But I had to brace up because I knew that you wouldn't get the justice you deserve or you demand by just smiling and doing all flipping your hair and the rest. You have to mean business. And so that's why I had to learn that when you go, you demand for this and you stand your ground. So at a young age, I had to learn that it was difficult because some people felt, oh, this person is too confident or too arrogant. And at some point I felt I used to just withdraw. But one day I talked to my mom and she's like, no, when it comes to a man or a boy, there's nothing like too confident. Why are they saying that about you, or arrogance? As long as you respect them and you say it in a good way, you're not, hurting anybody, then that's fine. You have to stand your ground. That's what I learned, and it was tough. Sometimes I'll go to meetings and I'm the youngest, and especially here in this part of the world, not many young girls have, the access to some places that I was privileged to access. So I knew that whenever I got those opportunities, I knew that I wasn't just going there for myself, but for millions of other young girls like me. So I had to speak up, and I had to, you know, demand for our freedom, for our dignity, and, you know, our rights to be protected. So moving forward, you know, it's still not easy, but it's getting easier, because I've learned that they don't need to like you to respect you. They just have to listen to you and, you know, put whatever you're saying down, pen it down, and know that you mean business. So at the end of the day, I would like to tell young girls and women, it's not too easy. You know, sometimes they will look at you like, what does this person have to say? But you have to, you know, prove yourself. Don't prove anyone wrong, but prove yourself right, that you know what you're doing, and, you know, be consistent with it. At the end of the day, there are days that you go home and you cry or feel down, but you have to just, you know, stand up the next day and keep moving. So for me, it was a lot of, you know, issues that I faced. Even here in Nigeria, there's something called colorism. When you are, you know, darker skinned than others, I mean, they look at you in some type of way, so weird in some places. So I faced a lot of that, but I think that just helped me. That just fueled the passion in me. And now there's literally no place that I cannot speak. Like, really, I have decided to turn my pain into purpose and passion that has fueled me to do the work I'm doing. Thank you.
Wadi Ben-Hirki, everybody! You couldn't have said it louder. Oh my God. Virtual standing ovation right now. Let's go. I think it was just the cherry on top of, like, I'm almost like happy tears. You know, I think you touched on so many points that are so valid. Like, when we show up, when we voice out, and when we stand our ground as females, we're not only doing it for ourselves, we understand that there's a bigger picture in mind. We're doing it as a movement. And I think this dips into the next question we have, actually from one of our registered questions from Denisha. We have a question here that you asked, saying, how can we lift other women around us? How do we use our girl power to the fullest potential? Who wants to take this one?
Can I? Am I permitted?
Yes, go.
Okay. So for me, I would say I would come from my own point of view, how in my organization, my team and I, we have set up some programs, you know, for both girls and women in the city and the ones at grassroots level. So we have some, you know, some smaller groups that each lead volunteer, you know, heads in their own states, their own cities, and their own communities, where we not just talk about you being the next Oprah Winfrey or Michelle Obama, but also localizing it, because personally, I feel that when you use like bigger names, they're great, but these women here cannot maybe relate to these people's stories abroad. So we just use people like myself. I haven't gone too far, but I have been able to do, you know, quite a number of things despite the challenges I faced. So when we go for such empowerment programs, as much as we call the bigger names, we also try to make them connect more. And I'll say something like, I'm also from this part of the country. I faced these challenges, but I was able to, you know, go past them. Positive mindset is more long lasting when we, you know, localize it. The second thing we do is, you know, organizing programs for them where we empower them, and, you know, not just empower them by giving them, you know, by teaching them some skills and vocations, but also mindset shift. Most of them have been so used to hearing things like, your place is in the kitchen, you don't deserve this, you don't deserve that. So we always try to, you know, renew their minds and tell them that there's nothing like that. You can achieve whatever you set your mind to do. And lastly, we have a long list of opportunities that we have access to. So when we have you know, a database of all our beneficiaries, the areas of interest and the areas of expertise. So for example, when we see an opportunity like media, we know that this is the person that we should, you know, inform about it. We put them through with the application. If they need a reference letter or something, we give that to them. We just build them up and just change their minds, you know. And online, we also, you know, post positive things that people will resonate with, and tell them that you should not let your color, your gender, your race, your whatever to limit you. We just keep doing that, you know, consistently. Yeah. And we've recorded a lot of success doing that.
Yeah, I think, you know, what you were saying again of of localizing it, it's a really interesting concept as well. Like, I don't feel like there's enough narrative about how we actually have to empower the women around us. We have to focus on the local. And so it's interesting because the other two panelists are coming in from relatively big cities and, you know, flashy lives, whether that's Jakarta or Singapore. The concept of, you know, influencers, or the more followers, the bigger the Instagram page, it's really difficult. How would you tackle the question of how do we empower more women, and then layering on top of what Wadi just mentioned about localizing the idols?
Yeah. So Rumorfe, a lot of our work is really rooted in empowering existing communities. And I think that's the way I would answer the question. Success won't happen without collaboration. And that means collaboration on all levels, whether that's with government agencies or other organizations or other individuals. Something, on an organizational level that Rumorfe tries to do is empower the women in the community to become leaders. And like I mentioned earlier, that's a development that we've seen, that from majority male leaders in the community we've worked with, we've seen more and more female leaders. We've seen more and more young female leaders and female religious leaders. And that's something that, it means a lot to us, because a lot of times these are the women that we've been working with for a couple of years, that they felt empowered enough to take a stand. I think a problem that sometimes different people have today is that we want to start something new without doing the proper research. And what I mean by that isn't that we don't understand the problem, because we do. We don't understand the problem on a local level. And so instead of going down, empowering the existing women, empowering the existing communities there, we start a new program that might not be very relevant to the children, to the women. So I think for me personally, it's first of all, empower existing communities through proper research, through proper action. And second of all, on a more individual level, is I think, and this kind of goes off what Stephanie said earlier, is that as individuals, be able to lift other women up. And so, and this is just something I do. I'm not sure how, everyone else does it, but I'm not too big, and Rumorfe is not too big either. I'm proud of what we've done, but we're not that big. And what I try to do is I try to open myself up to, young female or male leaders or young activists. If they ever want to contact me, that's something that's very, very possible, that they can just email me and I'll get right to them. And so I work from 9 to 5 p.m. And then after that, for 2 or 3 hours, I will be calling, some kids. I'll be, emailing with them just to find out what they're doing, how I can help, who I can connect them with. And sure, sometimes it's a pain. It takes really long. Their emails are a little bit messy sometimes, but it's something that I think is very important, because that's the guidance that I never got, as a young change maker. Because, we're told you're empowered, you're powerful, you can do it, but we're not equipped with the proper skills that we need to become change makers, right? We don't know how to write budgets. We don't know how to do research. We don't know how to make speeches. And so at the end of the day, we feel empowered, but we're not equipped with the skills or the training to be empowered. And so I think when it comes to talking about how we need to lift other women up, I think it just goes into how we can collaborate with other women on an organizational and on an individual level.
Faye, the fact that you mentioned exactly the last bit, right? Young people feel empowered, but they're like, where do I start? What do I do? How do I build a team? The practical questions, where can we find that? And that is Youthtopia. That's what we're all about. And the last point of, how do we empower women? Well, we work with other women. And, that's why as well, I think, now what has it been now? A couple of weeks ago, we collaborated on a project that's about to go live, top secret exclusive at the moment. Very, very exciting. Covering the topic of how to talk about taboos, how to navigate taboos. So again, a foundational skill, and sharing that. And Youthtopia is all about empowering each other, especially the peer-to-peer concept, so that once you feel that empowered state, well, how are you going to act on that? And what can you do with that? So definitely stay tuned for that one. Hot potatoing it to Steph.
Yeah, echoing obviously what the Faye and Wadi already shared, I think they really covered a lot of it, but I think small things to empower women. I think it's just, being there for each other, like checking in, also sharing, I think, or just messaging. Like sometimes I'm having, really hard days, or we're going through a lot, and then someone will just randomly message us being like, wow, I really loved your newsletter, which is like very small things, or like message and being like, this was a really powerful post for me. Or, after the festivals that we've run and stuff, when people share stuff, I think that really helps the team to keep going sometimes. And so now I do it to other people as well, and I think, for example, I discovered this Instagram account account of a lady called Jo Lorenz, and I literally devoured it for like 2 hours, which I've never done before. Just sat there and like devoured an account for 2 hours. So I messaged her. I was like, I've literally just devoured 2 hours of your content without stopping. You are phenomenal, and I want to like speak to you. And she replied back straight away with such a warm message saying that I'd made her day and these kind of things. I think, you know, sometimes this work, you can feel really isolated. You can feel really like, you know, you're trying so hard and you're kind of speaking to an empty echo chamber. And so, yeah, I think it's really important and nice to just also, when you've seen something you love, just message the person, obviously, because I think a lot of stuff has already been covered. But for me, I think that's something that I certainly love, and now I'm passing along and doing it to a lot of people, and it makes their day, and then it makes me happy and smile too. So it's like a nice supportive community that we want to create, because sustainability and activism is such important work, and we want to make sure that people are remembering to have some joy in those moments, because it can be very serious and tough sometimes. So I think when we can remember to smile and just have a little moment of gratitude, I think that can help us all keep going that little bit further.
Okay, and I think, you know, that's a tangible call to action, right? So all of you watching, how do we empower and uplift other women is just by letting them know, just reaching out, connecting with them. And especially during the time that we're living in, this is so, it needs to be top of mind. You know, reach out, make sure that this is on your to-do list. Challenge of the Utopia Talks, maybe a list of 5 women in your network, reach out to them and say or share something why they have empowered you or why they have inspired you. I think that's a nice little on the top of my head kind of challenge for all of you guys. Let us know how that goes and what that process looks like.
Well, then Mel, I'll just go right now with you, Wadi, Faye. That's already 4. I'm almost there. Just right on top of my head.
Oh, thank you.
So with the last, moving towards the end of the session, we did promise everybody a chance to ask questions straight away to the panelists. So we're going to open up this session and invite Elena on to unmute herself, share her video, and address the speakers of this Utopia Talks.
Hey, I'm Elena. First of all, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm just so excited to be here and like hear what you guys are talking about. My question is, do you think the future will be female? Because just now I discussed it on a political workshop camp thing with guys, and well, yeah, I'm from Germany, so I think Germany is one of the few countries where the genders are very equal, I'd say. We both have all the same chances and opportunities, and like only a few jobs it's like men get paid more, but I'd say it's really on the best way. So I talked to some guys and they were like, yeah, we need like a women quote. We need this because it's so unfair that there are so many men. And I was the only girl in the room, and I was like, no, because I think there's so many more girls that are studying, for example. Like if you see the statistics, a lot of girls are studying and a lot less boys. So I think for me, this is my question for you. Do you think the future will be female?
Okay, who wants to take that one? I know, Elena, thank you so much for that question. And I also think it's interesting, you know, being your insight to being the only female in the room already states a very, like, that was like question marks straight away, right? It's often, unfortunately, still a huge common theme that we're seeing, but I'm gonna give it over to Steph. Over to you.
I hope that the future is female. I think we're definitely working towards that. But I actually really hope, because I think there was, you know, more of a future looking thing, is that we get to the point where that's not even a question anymore, that diversity and female quotas and, you know, having like, you know, intersectionality and all these different things. It's like, can we just like remove all of that terminology, because we don't even need to discuss it anymore. And I really hope that we see that within our lifetime and very, very soon. And I think after seeing the movements that are happening this year and the activation of people, we need to keep those conversations going. We need to keep these movements, and we need to challenge. But I also think that we don't want to get to a point where it's like all about female and female empowerment, and we kind of lose the point of actually finding a balance, because I think it's important that we actually find like a beautiful balance and harmony eventually, and that's hopefully what we're working towards. So that is my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I think one side of the argument, and then you could take it too far where it becomes just only women, and I think the balance is something that, you know, that's the whole movement essentially. And now I'd like to hot potato this question over to Wadi. Could you take this on for us, please?
I believe the future could be next 5 years, 10 years, or 1,000 years. So what are we measuring? If we're looking at like many years from now, definitely, because like I said earlier on, we are really far from where we started. You know, many years ago, we did not have any maybe female president or governor or stuff like that, but we're getting there. Even in the private sector, we barely had female CEOs, and we're having them now. We barely had women who led grassroots organizations or associations and things like that, but we have that now. So will the future be female? Definitely. But one thing I like about what you said was, you know, striking a balance. So we shouldn't now go to the extreme. So striking a balance is very important. But will the future be female? Definitely, because there will be many more opportunities for girls and women to not just live, but to thrive. We may or may not be alive to see where we'll have maybe 100+ female presidents. But one good thing that I always tell myself is I may not be alive to see that future I want, where maybe Nigeria will have a female president or things like that. I hope to be alive for that to happen. But even if I don't get to see that happen, knowing that I played my own role to make that happen, you know, makes me happy. So at the end of the day, when we're all conscious and deliberate about our own individual efforts, collectively we'll see that we're gearing towards the future being female.
I just have one thing to say. Who's down for Wadi for president? Because I could totally see that for you in the future.
Yay!
You have all of our votes. And I think also just the fact that, yeah, what you said about female leadership, I mean, we have in 2020, you know, Kamala Harris as vice president, as the first woman in history. And I think, you know, we have come a long way, but we have a much longer way to go. Faye, I'd like to move the question on to you.
Yeah, so I think for me, when we're talking about the future and female empowerment, it's important to recognize like the different facets, the different levels of women empowerment, because on one hand, we see so many successes and we see so much more, especially on, you know, maybe a political viewpoint, but on a community level, there's a lot of different ways that women have just continued to be oppressed in ways that that is absolutely heartbreaking. I think when we talk about future as female, we talked a little bit about gender quotas earlier, and I think we have to see those as nothing but segues. I think they are essential, but they're essential as steps towards a time when gender quotas are not needed anymore. They're only needed because we need to widen the pool of applicants, to widen the pool of, people who we see as not necessarily valid, but as being able to take that spot, take that place. When we talk about future as female, there have been wonderful, wonderful steps in women empowerment and women leadership today. But on a community level, we've also seen increasing, or at least I can't talk about, other countries, but in Indonesia, we've seen increasing levels of violence against women. We've seen increasing levels of sexism, of sexual harassment, of sexual assault. And I think when we start to talk about future as female, it's essential not just to recognize the female figures who have overcome barriers, but the barriers that are still there. So when we talk about a lot of these female leaders, they've overcome barriers, but the barriers are still there. And that's what we're fighting, right? We're not telling people that you can overcome barriers. We're telling people that these barriers, we can completely erase these barriers. So I think when it comes to talk about future female, I think the future is bright, but we also really can't talk about it without acknowledging that there is a lot of instances, at least in Indonesia, at least nationally, where women are still not only culturally, but systematically oppressed.
Faye, I think, what you were saying here is reaching towards the end. The future equals ... right? We all tuning in right now, being part of, our own movements that we work in together, we have a huge opportunity to define that and to work towards a future that we're proud of. I think, if there's one thing here, there's a lot of trust and faith that the people here that you've learned about, or the people here that you've heard from, I think we're headed to a pretty good place. We're gonna have one more audience Q&A. I'm going to invite Tatjana to unmute herself, share her video, and address the panelists in a short and sweet way, just remembering time. Her question, the reason why we picked her is because it is a tangible way of how all of you can leave this panel discussion feeling like you know the next step. So Tatjana, please ask your question.
Hi. Thank you for the great opportunity. I'm going to ask you guys how you guys deal with the society opinion about to be young change maker and your girls, because I want to start to be a young change maker, but I'm too scared to because I've asked my friend to join me, but they only read my message and maybe think like what this girl gonna do, because how you guys deal with the society opinion to be a young change maker and girl change maker. Thank you.
Yes, I love this question because this is what Youthtopia is all about, and we're so happy you joined, Tatjana, to have these young change makers presented in front of you. Hopefully you have new role models, but I'll let them answer your question for you. How would you guys deal with it, and what's your advice to Tatjana?
I'm so happy that you really have the will, because the first thing is having the will, to do that thing. And secondly, society will be all right. That's what I say, because not everyone would support you in the end. Not everyone will buy into the idea that you have. But as long as you get those few people that have the same vision, the same passion as you can start from there. And secondly, we're happy that we have, technology. Youthtopia is there for you. We plan to, reach every corner of the world. So this is a platform where you have people that you could talk to, because like the road sometimes is lonely and sometimes it's sad. You feel so much pressure, but you have Youthtopia. You have us here that you could just write us a mail, or we could hop on a call and would advise you. So the first step is the will, and I'm thankful that you have that will. Second step, you could start by reaching out to us and getting those few friends in your community to start. So not everyone in the society will support you, but as long as you have those key people supporting you.
Thank you, Wadi, especially for that awesome plug. But I'm just gonna hand it over to Steph. Over to you. What's your advice?
I think it's such a great question, and it's something that I think is spoken about so much as well. And there's an amazing TED talk that I'm going to reference because it's that feeling of imposter syndrome. And there's an amazing TED talk by a lady called, now I'm going to forget her name. I'm sure someone can share it in the chat if you know the one I'm talking about. But it basically, when you're starting something, or even when you're really successful or you've got some movement and stuff, sometimes you have this little voice in your head that's like, I'm just not good enough, or I can't do this, or what are people going to think of me? And I think what Wadi was saying about just like, who cares? Like at the end of the day, as long as you're doing something that you're passionate about and you believe in, you kind of have to just learn how to tune that voice really low in your head and just ignore it, or just say like, so what? So what's going to happen? And this is something I've still practiced to this day, because I still have moments where I'm like, do I really think I can do this? And so I think just having that faith and belief in yourself and really asking, so what does it matter? What's the worst thing that can happen? And just realizing that nothing that bad will actually ever really happen. Like your fears around these situations of putting yourself out there, they never actually come true. And even if they do, you learn such a good lesson from it that you end up growing as a person. So you kind of just have to remember that no matter what happens, it's all win-win, and just trying to have that core belief in yourself. Because I think the belief in ourselves is the most important thing we have to have. Because if you don't believe yourself, then others aren't going to believe you either. So be strong.
Beautifully said, Steph. And I think also, I'd just like to reiterate what Steph said. You have to believe in yourself, but also what Wadi said, which is not everyone will support you, but again, Youthtopia will. And so just reach out, because you have this amazing community with such inspirational people, and you just have to email them and you'll get results. So I'd like to pass this on to Faye now. Take it away.
Yeah, so I think everybody already said everything incredible. So I guess I'll just, tack on my little piece of advice, is just that, okay, words hurt, but as much as you can, just remember that actions are what make change. And so when people put you down, and they will, you really have to, you don't feel like you need to prove yourself, because you're already incredible. But in order to make sure your movement succeeds, show that through action. Don't be too invested in what other people are saying, or even what you're saying, because sometimes we get caught up in that too. We're like, yes, I can do it. But at the end of the day, because we're so, we're so like, oh, I can. We don't focus enough on the work that we're doing. So I think for me, it's just focus on your action above all else. It's going to be hard, but don't feel too saddened by what people are going to say. And I'll tack on, I'm not sure where you are, but if you are in Indonesia, I would love to help. Rumah Faye would love to send you something. Just let us know. I'm putting my email in the chat for everyone, but Tatjana, this is for you. If you want to contact me, and Youthtopia is open to you as well, but if you're closer to Jakarta than to Bali, maybe we can figure something out. I'd love to help you. Just let me know. And we can definitely connect you with other young people who want to make a difference with you, just in case your friends who have left you on red don't want to help. So just let me know and we'll figure something out.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Faye. And Tatjana, I hope that answered your question. We specifically chose your answer as the last one because we felt that this would give a strong ending note to what everybody watching can go home with. So stand up for yourself, but stand up for other women. You do that by localizing the idols in your area, empowering each other, and so many things I'm still digesting as we speak. But I really am so grateful for everybody joining and tuning in tonight. Before we part ways, I would love to invite everybody to share their video for a virtual group photo. This is amazing. Everybody smile. I think our group is taking it. Okay, amazing. Thank you, everybody. And we're wishing everyone a healthy, safe, strong. I love seeing all these female faces in videos. I do see male representatives as well. This is important as it is a community, global effort that we need to be doing. So once again, thank you for your time and for your attention, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Wadi. Bye, Steph. Thank you, Faye.
Thank you. See you guys soon.